Welcome everyone to the council meeting for the 11th of August 2020, which I now declare open. Although it's not possible for members of the public to join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to everyone who is watching. So on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, that are the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples tonight. Now, councillors, we do have two apologies tonight. An apology from Councillor Sypek and Councillor Lawrence. Can I please have a mover and a seconder that those apologies please be noted? Move Councillor Gachamarici, seconded Councillor Sarais. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. I'll also note at this moment that Councillor Sharp has advised that she's running late, so she may be joining us later on in the meeting. Now, councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday, the 28th of July, be confirmed? Moved, Councillor Nation. Seconded, Councillor Sarais. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Now, councillors, does anyone have a conflict of interest on any item on the agenda this evening? No, a few shakes of the head there. Beautiful. Now, I don't believe we have any presentations, petitions or joint letters, unless I hear something now. Nope. So we now come to item 8 on the agenda, which is public question time. And we have received questions from members of the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have residents in the public gallery, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our meeting procedure protocol, which requires questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and to ask CEO Brian Lancaster to read the responses. Can I please have a mover that council resolves to suspend the public question provisions in its meeting procedure protocol to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and answered by the CEO for this meeting?
So moved.
Moved, Councillor Sarais. Seconded, Councillor Nation. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Okay, so tonight's first question is from Sarah Foley. Thank you, Sarah, for your question. These questions are obviously in the submitter's words. So Sarah's question reads, with reference to agenda item 10.7, Local Parks Grant Program, Pocket Parks, section 3.2.2, part of the guidelines for the Pocket Park scheme state that there needs to be community engagement and a demonstrated need for sites nominated for the Pocket Park scheme. Could the MVCC please outline this process for how communities for the various sites were engaged, this particularly as the details of the nominated sites were disclosed and made an agenda item for a council meeting that is after the close of application for the Pocket Park funding scheme? Again, they were in Sarah's words, and I will ask the CEO, Brian Lancaster, to please respond.
Thank you, Mayor. Council has been granted an extension to the close of application date so that submission can be made following tonight's council meeting. Council can submit any site that it wishes to include for consideration. There are many criteria that the state government will use in assessing the applications, one of which is whether the site is identified in an approved open space plan, structure plan or recreation plan that has undergone community engagement. The reason that the officer's preferred option is 36 Patterson Street is because this is the site of a potential future park as per the Moonee Valley 2040 strategy, which calls for acquisition of land in Moonee Ponds to create more open space. The site is currently being acquired for this purpose. No other shortlisted project sites have such a direct link to the Moonee Valley 2040 strategy. There was consultation on the Moonee Valley 2040 strategy for each neighbourhood. If council submits a grant application for pocket parks and if the application is successful, the design of the pocket park will be determined with community input. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Brian. The next questions are from Sharon Mumford. Thank you, Sharon, for your questions. Sharon's question reads, over recent years, the Victoria State Government has injected several $1 million towards Strathmore Secondary College and Strathmore North Primary Schools due to the rapid population growth in the Strathmore area. Residents have witnessed a massive amount of new residential construction from original houses that have been levelled to accommodate this growth. In the agenda report for Tuesday, the 11th of August, the Strathade Reserve option was partly dismissed due to being not a built-up area with growing population. My questions are, what is the criterion to constitute a built-up area? And if MBCC considers Strathmore as an area of not having a growing population, what is the measure for sufficient population growth for an area to be put forward for a grant such as this? Thank you, Sharon, for your questions, and I will ask Brian, the CEO, to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. Council recognises that there is growth in Strathmore. However, this growth is much lower than in our activity centres. The report on pocket parks tonight is not making the case for what constitutes growth or not, but indicating which of the several parks has the strongest case for funding against state government guidelines. The Moonee Pond site is adjacent to an activity centre. The funding body will be looking at places in those high growth areas. The state government identifies activity centres for all of Melbourne. The Government's Plan Melbourne identifies 6 major activity centres in Moonee Valley, namely Airport West, Moonee Ponds, Nidri Keeler Road, North Essendon, Racecourse Road, Union Road. Council's open space strategy indicates that small local open spaces equivalent to a pocket park are appropriate in the following suburbs: Airport West, Ascot Vale, Essendon, Essendon North, Flemington, Moonee Ponds, Newmarket, Nidri and Travancore. This follows the similar logic of the state government's emphasis on pocket parks in growth areas. Small parks are best for these sites. In more suburban locations, larger parks are more appropriate and alternative funding is offered for these. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you to CEO Brian Lancaster, and thank you, Sharon, for your questions. The next 2 questions are from Judith Whelan. Thank you, Judith, for your questions. Again, I will read these out in Judith's words in the way she submitted them. So, can the council please explain why this agenda item 10.3, response to petition, abandoned, unused or unregistered cars in Knight, Aberdeen, Hedowig, Buckley and Vita streets in Aberfeldie and Essendon only discusses this petition in terms of compliance of existing parking and bylaws? It seems this has been a significant problem according to your office's report since 2015. Not mentioned in the report is that the residents appear to have been the catalyst that has resulted in parking restrictions being placed in this street, Aberdeen Crescent, and the resulting move of some 13 or more motor vehicles to the south side of Buckley Street and surrounds. I'd like to remind the councillors that this petition alone represents 23 residents who contribute to council revenue. There are many more residents that are only too happy to add their names to this submission, especially Aberdeen Crescent residents who have been fighting for this for 5 years and the 29 complaints received as per your report. This is a large number of your residents that deserve to be heard and have their concerns not only addressed but resolved. Again, those words were as submitted from Judith Whelan, and I will ask the CEO, Brian Lancaster, to please respond.
Thank you, Mayor. The petition requested that Council investigate the unused and unregistered vehicles being parked in streets identified in the petition. This has occurred and the City Compliance and Parking teams have taken action to remove or issue infringements where vehicles are found to be non-compliant with the Victorian road rules or Council's local law requirements. Investigations undertaken by a number of areas of Council have not been able to ascertain any illegal activity relating to the buying or selling of vehicles occurring in this area. One resident has an approved home occupation under the planning scheme, which is not related to the buying or selling of vehicles. The City Compliance team will continue to work with local residents to address any further reported incidents in the area through targeted patrols and regular proactive inspections of the streets concerned. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you to our CEO, Brian Lancaster. I'll now read Judith's second question, again in Judith's words. Could the council please advise why it does not undertake a parking review on the south side of Buckley Street similar to the Buckley Park local area traffic management study that I note the council was lauded for in 2016? A traffic plan must have been done for the Ryman development, which would have included parking. We want a resolution to this long-term issue. Despite letters and contact made over many years, we are never really consulted. We, your ratepayers, are well placed to make practical suggestions as we live it daily. Businesses are losing customers as people cannot park nearby, so move on to another shop. Visitors cannot park, especially in Hedowig and Knight Streets. Some ideas are Knight Street, extend existing school parking restrictions to the north side. Aberdeen Street, add 2-hour parking restrictions with permits on the west side as per the east side of the street. Buckley Street, introduce 2-hour parking from Aberdeen Street to the bus stop. And then in brackets, this could be, the next dot point is brackets. This could be temporary, close bracket, or alternatively get Vic Roads to put clearway signs from 5 to 7 p.m. Hedowig Street, introduce resident parking closest to Buckley Street where up to 4 cars or trucks are left all the time. We know workers will be there from Ryman, but you could introduce a parking permit to be issued to workers. We want a solution to this problem. It has gone on long enough. Again, those were the words that were submitted by Judith, and I will be asking the CEO, Brian Lancaster, to please respond.
Thank you, Mayor. In recent years, Council has conducted 1 or 2 local area traffic management studies called LATMs. This includes, as noted, the Buckley LATM in 2015-16. There are 22 LATM areas in the municipality, and their order of priority was established based on a number of criteria, including crash history and the level of community concerns expressed. The Boulevard Area LATM study, which roughly matches the suburb of Aberfeldie, is scheduled to be run in 2025-2026. Regardless of the LATM schedule, Council still makes proactive and reactive parking and transport changes across all suburbs. An example of such action was introduced in 2017, where 2P parking was provided outside number 1 to 7 Aberdeen Street following investigation and consultation with residents. Council is unable to complete parking surveys at the current time due to the state of emergency. But during an afternoon visit on July 16, observed parking was easily available near Tony's Pies on Aberdeen Street between Buckley Street and Knight Street. Your specific suggestions are noted and will be investigated once Council is again able to legally do so. We would not issue permits to construction workers, as that is contrary to our permit parking policy and could lead to additional parking in areas where restrictions have been placed to provide priority access for residents or customers visiting the shopping strip. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you to our CEO, Brian Lancaster, for those responses. Now, the final 2 questions are from Rose Isa. Thank you, Rose, for your questions. And again, in Rose's words, Rose's first question reads, what was the cost of the land at 36 Patterson Street, Moonee Ponds? What is the intended use of the land? And were community members and property owners in the area consulted about the purchase of the property? Thank you, Rose, for your questions. I will pass to the CEO, Brian Lancaster.
Thank you, Mayor. The intended use for this property is a community purpose, being public open space. When considering land acquisitions, Council relies on its endorsed long-term plan, Moonee Valley 2040, and any associated plans which have undergone considerable community consultation prior to adoption. With these measures in place, Council generally does not consult on individual property acquisitions. The community will be consulted on the concept design prior to the site's proposed conversion to open space. As with many property purchases, the purchase price will not be disclosed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you to the CEO, Brian Lancaster, for that response. Now, Rose's second question reads, what is the definition of pop-up segregated bike lanes on page 10 of the MV 2040 Action Plan Connected? And to the CEO, Brian Lancaster, for a response.
Thank you again, Mayor. Pop-up infrastructure can basically be seen as a trial. It can be implemented quickly and cheaply to provide immediate benefits during this difficult time. It then allows us to monitor its impacts and effectiveness and be responsive to any changes required, for example, in relation to safety concerns. The proposed pop-up items in the draft plan are intended to be achieved in consultation and cooperation with State Government's Department of Transport to ensure road network continues to operate safely and appropriately. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So thank you to all of the residents that have submitted questions tonight. And thank you to our CEO, Brian Lancaster, for the responses. Now, there are no reports from special committees, so we will move straight to agenda item 10.1, which is 34 Marshall Street, Flemington, lot 16 on plan of subdivision 005088, partial demolition of a dwelling, alterations and additions to a dwelling in a heritage overlay area and works in an environmental Significance Overlay Area Schedule 2. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Sorry, I'm happy to move it. I just need to find it in my notes. Sorry.
No problems.
So the motion is in the form of the officer's recommendation, with the addition of endorsement condition 1A, which is the proposed roof and any associated walls to not be visible on a view line diagram in accordance with the City of Moonee Valley Heritage Guidelines, whilst maintaining a pitched roof form. And then all the other endorsement conditions just subsequently follow after that insertion of 1A.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. So this application is located at 34 Marshall Street, Flemington. It's an extension to an existing property, which includes partial demolition of the dwelling, the addition to the rear, including a first floor, alterations to the front facade, including to the windows and the veranda, and works in an environmental significance overlay. This particular area of Flemington is quite unique. Marshall Street and its surrounding streets, very small titles, very old houses, very skinny streets, an area that's very much valued by those who live in the area. It's valued by those who don't live in the area as well, I can tell you that. So this application, as I said, it's for a partial demolition. It's the addition of an upper floor, which has an ensuite and a bedroom. And obviously one of the things that we need to make sure when we're looking at any sort of development, be it a renovation, an extension, or a new build in areas that have historical significance, is to make sure they're sensitive to the surrounding area. The tweak in the conditions, in the endorsed conditions that has been added, basically, in simple terms, is going to set back the front of the upper level. So the upper level has a bedroom at the back and an ensuite at the front, which on existing sight lines would be visible from street level. So this modification is to either set back that ensuite or to drop the height of the ensuite, basically to make that second story, to make sure it's not visible from street level. And that's something that's quite common along Marshall Street, is that quite a few of the properties have had an extension or an additional level added, but that streetscape, those facades are maintained. One of the other things that just should be noted with this application is the change to the front facade and the windows. And the applicant is actually going to remove the existing windows, which are a bit of a 70s addition, and actually install window frames that are consistent with the age of the property. So that particular change is not a controversial change, it's actually restoring it back to what it was prior to the 70s edition of those windows. Look, all in all, this is an adequate application. Obviously, no one likes any change in anywhere, let alone areas of historical and heritage significance. But I think that with this additional condition, it finds a nice medium that will hopefully ensure that the applicants will have a lovely old property that they will look after for years, but also it doesn't impact too much on the neighbours' amenity and the general area's amenity. So yeah, I'd commend this particular recommendation with that change in one of the conditions to fellow councillors for your approval.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. So I'd certainly note, as strange as it might seem, that these are some of the more difficult applications that we have to actually decide when they come to council. And the reason for me is that because there are elements of subjectivity when it comes to assessing the impact on heritage places. And we've certainly seen what I would term as probably wildly varied impacts, or wildly varied outcomes, I should say, at VCAT when it has come to heritage matters. And in large part, that's because of that subjectivity that comes into when assessing the impacts in heritage areas. And usually it's my strong preference in these situations where possible for outcomes to be negotiated rather than relying on the VCAT lottery, which can be set up a system of losers and winners. So as Council and Nation has indicated, what's proposed is a partial demolition and extension. The report recommends approval based on the level of compliance. When we had the consultation, there were some concerns expressed around bulk and height, and also concerns around the impacts on streetscape. So I think what Council and Nation through this proposed motion has tried to do is to try to seek that balance between enabling what is from the report a compliant application, but also trying to mitigate the impacts from the surrounds. So on that basis, I wouldn't have been able to support the officer's recommendation as it was, but with the addition of this change, I can. It's also important to note that in addition to the heritage trigger, there's also an ESO trigger, and I would note that there will be no significant trees removed as part of this proposal, which again is very important. So all things considered and being mindful of how these can play out, on balance, I'm okay with supporting the motion put before us.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Cusack.
Just want to make a couple of comments, but before I do, I just note that in the motion, in the renumbering, C now has to refer to condition 1B, not 1A, as in the published papers that are for this meeting.
Apologies, just one moment, Councillor Cusack. Can I just get that?
It's contained in the alternative motion that Councillor Nation referred to, but in the published papers that people might be looking at home.
Can I just confirm with governance that it was okay as read? If there's someone from governance online, or the CEO, please. The CEO online or governance? Well, this is a little bit awkward.
I don't know where governance is. I don't know where governance is, Mayor, but that's fine. Yep, I think they've got that, but I'll need to check with Alison.
Is it all right if we continue with the debate?
Yes.
Just confirming councillors understand what we are debating on and that the motion was clear. I just get a nod from Councillor Sorais. You're clear on what we're discussing? Okay, thank you, Councillor Cusack. If you could please continue.
That was just for the benefit of the home viewers as much as anything else. All right. I suppose when I sat in the consultation meeting, the critical question that was on the table was about the visual bulk of this development, and it was noted from several aspects. Neighbours on either or to the side of the development were concerned about what they were looking at, and had hoped to reduce the height and the impact of that, and to have something approaching the development or the extension that had happened to their own properties. And the other key question for Marshall Street was how this development faces onto Marshall Street. There have been a number of very important consultations held with community about other developments in Marshall Street and their imposition on the character of that neighbourhood. But I note that they've been essentially corner blocks, and so therefore somewhat different in character to this one. I support the motion because it actually reinforces council's heritage policy, and that we shouldn't be straying away from that, and the maintenance of that is so critical in this area, as has been pointed out. And as Councillor Nation has pointed out, the consequential impact of this will be to either lower the proposed development at the rear, or to a further setback of the ensuite, and again achieving some degree of comfort for the neighbours who had made an objection about the bulk of it. And finally, I am also very pleased that the front of this house, which is an important property because it's at the T-junction as you drive up from the south from Racecourse Road. So it's almost the first property you see in the street. To have it renovated so that it's restored back to what it would have looked like at when it was built is important, and also to ensure that there is the ASO in place, as Councillor Marshall pointed out, equally critical. So on balance, this is possibly the best arrangement that we could come to make sure that things are actually put in place, and to to work within the policy and the arrangements that we actually have, and to use the tools that we currently have to ensure that the policy is implemented. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Councillor Cusack. Did any other councillor wish to speak on this item? No, and I have had confirmation from governance that the proposed motion is correct in terms of the numbering. So we're okay to continue, and everyone is clear in terms of what we are voting on. Beautiful. So now I'll just ask again. I don't believe there was anybody else that wanted to speak. I will ask again. No. In that case, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the response to petition replacement of trees on Fenton Street, Ascot Vale. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Yes, I'd like to move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. And a seconder? Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you. So this is a response, as indicates, to a petition that we received, and I think people will probably be surprised to realise the number of requests for tree removals that council actually receives. And because of that, it's incredibly important that any tree removal is dealt with in accordance with the council's tree management plan. And what that plan does is set out a range of criteria that are used to assess whether it's appropriate to actually remove a tree. And it is important that we rely on that particular document when we look at tree removals, because there's a significant cost associated with removing and replacing grown trees. There's certainly environmental impacts, but also there's significant financial impacts too, both associated with the value of a mature tree, and also obviously ongoing maintenance as you try to get younger trees up to the appropriate level of growth. And this is even more important given council has, I always feel like I need to preface it with the award-winning 30% tree canopy cover target by 2040. So anything which would potentially hinder our ability to actually achieve that target needs to be considered particularly closely. So in this particular situation, what has happened is that council's arborist has gone and looked at the trees in question, and you can see in section 3.3 of the report, there's actually an outline in relation to the various different species of trees. And what's been indicated through that inspection is that most of the trees are in good condition, and that they'll have a safe, useful life expectancy of over 20 years. The honey myrtles are indicated as being in average condition and with a safe, useful life expectancy of less than 5 years. And so given their condition, they've been scheduled for a removal and replanting with an appropriate species of trees in 2022. It was actually quite timely, because last night at the Environment Pack that I chair, we had a brief discussion about the importance of tree selection, and it came up how our arborists rely on academic and other advice in determining appropriate tree species for particular areas. And I think as a council, we've actually got some work to do in relaying to our community how appropriate species of trees are selected, and also the value of Indigenous species too, because I think that that's something that we probably don't communicate well enough with our community, certainly in terms of resilience in light of climate change, in terms of life expectancy, maintenance, and in terms of the incredibly important issue of biodiversity. Having Indigenous trees and plantings is just so important. So our species, they're not just selected at random. The preferred species in particular streets, they're selected based on a significant amount of research and being mindful of all of those broader impacts that are just so important. So I hope that in communicating to the petitioner that these issues can really be pointed out to them so that they can understand how this decision has been arrived at.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously speaking in favour of this recommendation to retain the trees. And I do so noting that two of the tree species that are listed as problem tree species as per the residents' views, the prickly paperbark and Queensland brush box. I do note that they can be extremely frustrating to have to deal with. You know, if we had our time again, particularly the prickly paperbark wouldn't be planted because it's actually not a tree we plant anymore, because we know that it can be an inconvenience with the little spurs and spikes that it leaves everywhere. That said, a lot of councils, including City of Moreland, it actually is one of their recommended tree planting species. So we've actually struck that off our list of future tree plantings. But what we can't do is remove mature trees, even though they've got some inconveniences, because as Councillor Marshall said, it goes completely against our aim to have a 30% tree canopy. And knowing how long trees take to mature, it just is not feasible in this case to remove the prickly paperbark and Queensland brush box, which even just removing those two species from Fenton Street would be 56 mature trees. I can't support that number of trees being removed. If it was a tenth of that, probably still wouldn't even be able to support that, them being removed. So I am happy to support this motion, noting that these trees are frustrating to live with, but at the end of the day, we have a goal, we have a tree canopy goal. These are mature trees in good health, and I just can't, I can't support any proposals to remove them. So yeah, obviously happy to support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I reluctantly support the motion. I see the logic in it and I understand what the council is attempting to achieve. And I think that probably all the residents in Fenton Street would be absolutely supportive of that as well. Trouble is they have to live with these bloody trees too. And that's the rub. And unfortunately, I know that those people are putting up with a situation where there are an inordinate number of trees in their street. As Councillor Nation has pointed out, there's 56 of the bloody things, and they do create a real issue for the amenity of people in that neighbourhood. I also note that in order for them to fit into the neighbourhood over the years, council has had to undertake some very creative pruning in order to be able to let power lines through and all the rest of it. And it's something of a shame to see those trees that in their own right are very good looking trees, but are just in the wrong place, go through that. I take up Councillor Marshall's point, and I'm not going to propose it here in this motion, but somewhere along the line, this council needs to have a very, very serious conversation with its community about how it's going to achieve its 30% canopy coverage and how that applies in in streetscapes, and how suitable trees that provide biodiversity and a range of different types of looks will meet that objective. Unfortunately, when people were planting those trees 30 or 40 years ago, their rule of thumb was not terribly scientific, but rather to replace specimens that weren't particularly native, if you like. The trouble now is that we've got intrusions into people's onto footpaths and into people's properties and the likes of that we have to contend with. I note that 5 of the trees will be reviewed over the next 5 years. That's good, and I expect that somewhere in before the next 20 years, some of these trees will prove that even though they're fit specimens now, may become so troublesome that they might need to be attended to on a one-to-one basis, rather than to, as we had as the basis of this petition, which was to scorch them all out of the area in one hit. But I think a much more reasoned plan over time to address this issue is a better approach. And but I thank the petitioners for bringing it up, because the reality is that their street is particularly plagued by it, and 2 streets down parallel to them, you now have Brisbane Street with all the beautiful jacarandas that have been planted in it. I'll finish there.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I don't, but I believe you sort of answered your own dissent, Councillor Cusack, and you said you're in support, so I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.3 on the agenda is the response to a petition, abandoned, unused or unregistered cars in Knight, Aberdeen, Hedowig, Buckley and Vita streets in Aberfeldie and Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Gattrimarici.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Gattrimarici. And a seconder. Councillor Sorais. Councillor Gattrimarici, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will briefly, the report is fairly detailed, and as you could tell from the question time questions as well, there is a really long history at this site of issues and concerns that continue to be investigated and continue to be looked into. As the report identified, where there have been non-compliances, those cars have been impounded or fines have been issued. We've done the things that we can within what's available to us. Certainly, the other piece that I will note is the more recent investigations have obviously occurred in a time where there may have been less traffic due to COVID and schools not being around. So the officer's recommendation and the report identifies that we're doing all we can at the moment, but we obviously will continue to do that. We will continue to proactively monitor what's going on in these streets. Certainly, we are aware that people can lodge a complaint, whether that's through Snap Send Solve, or you can email it to the council email or Councillors, and we can forward it on. We have and will continue to look into things as they arise. So if you see things that are concerning to you, please continue to raise them, and council will continue to investigate those. But certainly in terms of what has been able to be looked into, the things that are of concern have been actioned so far. So,
thank you, Councillor Gattrimarici. Councillor Sorais.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just in the report, and for those who may be watching that don't have the report in front of them, I'm just querying something in the report that says, it talks about 3.2, which says there was an investigation taking place.
Councillor Sorais, is this a point of clarification?
It is.
Yes. Okay. If you could please ask it. Yep.
So it says in the outcome of the investigation is determined the business in question and use of the land is operating within the requirements of the planning scheme. Further down on 3.5, just under that, where it talks about the parking control team that have responded to 72 complaints regarding the illegally parked vehicles over the last 2-year period in those locations. It says, as a result, 460 infringement notices have been issued to illegally parked vehicles which were detected in the locations listed above. So what I'm trying to clarify here is, if it is operating within the requirements of the planning scheme, there obviously is an issue with illegally parked vehicles because 460 infringement notices have been issued. So
Yes.
I want clarification as to, I don't know how to word this. Well, firstly, have they been
If they're
paid and
related,
covered? But
I've
it kind of contradicts what 3.2 says in regards to the investigation determined the business was operating
Okay.
within the requirements, and yet the's been 460 infringement notices. So
okay. I
how's that
think
come
what
about?
we'll do is, if we've got Kerry Patterson online, Kerry, are you available at the moment?
Yes, councillors.
Kerry, was that point of clarification clear enough for you to just give a brief explanation to Councillor Saray so she understands?
I'm just wanted to get the point she was looking at in the report. Sorry, which
3.2, which talks about the outcome from the complaints that were received in 2017, 2018, 2019 and 2020.
Yep.
Determining that the business in question and the use of the land is operating within the requirements of the planning scheme.
Mhm.
And then as we go down to 3.5, responding to 72 complaints in those streets, the next paragraph reads, as a result, 460 infringement notices have been issued to illegally parked vehicles which were detected in the locations listed above. So I'm wanting to clarify how they all came about, if this area or this property was operating within the requirements of the planning scheme.
councillor, they aren't necessarily associated. We couldn't associate them with a particular property. They've just been vehicles that have been parked illegally in the streets or within the time zones, exceeding the time zones that are posted in those areas. And that 460 infringements was over, I think, a 3 or 4 year period that we've been monitoring the parking around that area.
Okay, thank you. It's fine.
Thank you. Thank you to Kerry Patterson, the manager for that area. Councillor Saray, would you like to continue with speaking on this
Look,
motion?
I'm aware of this being an issue ongoing for many years. It's come up as council's, traffic and transport portfolio holder, and the same answers do come back. There is an issue there clearly that I think earlier there was a mention about, the ratepayers themselves are well placed to make practical suggestions as they live these things daily. So this has come from residents that obviously live in this perimeter and are putting forward these complaints, that we're being told that those infringement notices come from the streets in that precinct and that can't be determined if they are actually associated or related to the property in question that we're talking about. It's obviously operating within the requirements of the planning scheme. It's one of those messy situations, but I guess if this is what the officers are telling us, is the outcome from what has been put forward to us, then so be it.
Thank you, Councillor Saray. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No. I believe that Councillor Saray sort of answered your own questions, so I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Cusack, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Gaucherici and Councillor Nation. All those against? That is Councillor Saray. That motion is carried. Item 10.4 on the agenda is return of the 2020 general revaluation. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak on the item?
it is a fairly procedural item. The details are entailed in the report. The only thing I'd say to note is that the property valuations have moved from being undertaken once every 2 years to every year. Obviously, these annual valuations are used to calculate council rates to the closest possible figure of the current value. Obviously, things may change in the next 12 months and then be reflected in the following revaluation, depending on where the property market is. Yeah, this is fairly procedural. Other councillors may wish to speak further, but the details are pretty much there in the report. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Cusack.
Pardon me, Mayor. The valuation is, as Councillor Nation said, fairly procedural. It operates under the guidance of the Act. We haven't varied any of that sort of thing. Moving to an annual basis, of course, allows for a more nuanced arrangement where properties, if they do rise and fall in value, and that's noted, you can actually, our rate valuation will reflect that quicker rather than leaving them just sitting over a 2-year period. And in the current climate, we note that this is picking up 2019. I'm sure that 2020 figures will be coming through in the not too distant future, and you'll see changes there. I think 3.5 of the officer's report is well worth considering, and that is that while we apply a 2% rate cap, we apply that across the whole of all properties in the municipality. So some will rise and some will fall as a consequence of that. It's not just an application of 2% on every single individual property. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? So I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.5 on the agenda is the Audit and Risk Committee Charter. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack.
Mayor, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation as the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. And a seconder? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak on the item?
The Audit Committee has, for some time, had to look at a number of changes that have been required under its operation, and to tidy up and bring together and strengthen a series of issues and address those. And in doing that, has went back to its original basis of its establishment documents, and therefore the charter in which it operates under, and to make sure that that aligns with current Act requirements and also changes that are occurring within Moonee Valley, and also best practice, I presume, across the whole board of across the board in the auditing world. So the committee has been established to so the whole changes that have occurred relate to matters around governance principles, and monitoring internal controls, monitoring council financial and performance reporting, and overseeing internal audits, external audits, monitor related party transactions. The Audit Committee took all of these bits on board, has updated its charter to ensure that those controls are in place, and that it is now has a charter that is reflective of modern and newer requirements that are, as I said before, falling into practice of council. Things like, in particular, things like understanding and operating its its internal and external audit functions and so on like that. So this is a good thing for Moonee Valley. It's an improvement, and it's also been supported by the external auditors of the council. So I give it to councillors to endorse.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall.
Well, Councillor Cusack has been quite thorough in his debate in relation to this. Obviously, this has come about through the new Local Government Act that we have that's has commenced in parts. And I think this is a much improved charter, certainly in terms of the enhanced monitoring and oversight functions, providing much greater guidance in relation to what the committee will be required to do. There's also more detail about performance reviews of the actual performance of the audit committee, or I should say the audit and risk committee itself, and greater guidance about the info that should be publicly available to people around the performance and the functions of the audit committee. There are also enhanced provisions there in relation to misuse of position and conflict of interest in relation to the members of the committee. So all in all, this is a greatly enhanced document, and I certainly think it's one that deserves to be endorsed.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.6 on tonight's agenda is the proposed discontinuance and sale of land from Road Reserve abutting 6 South Road, Airport West. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Soares, and a seconder. Councillor Gauchimarici. Councillor Soares, would you like to speak on the item?
Look, basically this was about a request that came from some residents wanting to seek approval to get or to apply for the purchase of the discontinuance and sale of the land from the Road Reserve abutting 6 South Road, Airport West. All the regulatory requirements were completed by council. The submission period closed on the 8th of July 2020 and no submissions in favour or objecting to the proposal were received. So council has fulfilled its requirements under the Act and can proceed with the proposal. So it's just completing that whole procedure.
Thank you, Councillor Soares. Councillor Gauchimarici.
No, thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 10.7 on tonight's agenda is the Local Parks Grant Program Pocket Parks. Councillors, do I have a motion? Item 10.7, the Local Parks Grant Programs Pocket Parks. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Soares, is your hand up? No? Councillor, apology, I'll just ask for it again. I just saw hands all at the same time. Item 10.7, Local Parks Grant Program Pocket Parks. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Well,
Councillor Cusack.
Sorry, Mayor, I'll move a motion in line with the officer's recommendation, although I know that there was some discussion of other.
The officer's recommendation is what you are moving. Do I have a seconder? So if there is no seconder, this will, Councillor Cusack's motion will lapse. And I need to confirm with governance if it lapses, if there could be a foreshadowed motion at this point, or whether it lapses and therefore nothing would be submitted.
Could I foreshadow an alternative in case?
I'm just not sure whether you can foreshadow when it's not actually on the floor yet. Is there a seconder for the motion? If not, I'll ask for some governance advice.
Madam Mayor, I'll second the motion so that it is on the floor, and then if an alternate motion comes up, there is an option.
Thank you. Okay. And Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak on the item?
Just a second, Mayor. Sorry, mate. Oh, just getting no. There is a misdoings. All right. Council has been invited by the state government to make application for an initiative by the state government to provide funding in built up areas to create pocket parks. And there are particular guidelines associated with these that relate to how obviously the government will make its decision. And it requires, and I'm not going to relate them all, but it requires that the proposed pocket parks, as I said, in built up areas, that they're in areas where there is a proven need, that there is a pocket park required or could be of benefit to the community, and that the council is able to show evidence that it's either got the land or is in the process of acquiring it, and also that it's able to make a contribution towards the development of the pocket park. The motion that we have in front of us is for 36 Patterson Street, a property that council has recently acquired and is in the process of hopefully settling on very shortly, and that we want to put that up to the government to propose. To propose to the government the funding of that pocket park at that location. The location has been selected on the basis that it falls within Moonee Valley 2040. It's in the Moonee Ponds area, which is undergoing substantial change and very high level numbers of residents moving in there, and that there is a strategic advantage in creating small greened areas for the community in Moonee Ponds to be able to use. It's also got a relevance to the Moonee Ponds Creek and its and the cycling path, pardon me, and will have an extra benefit in that space, providing a potential stop off. The design of the parks and how it will be finally completed will be obviously done through the consultation with the community, as we have started to do with the first round of these pocket parks, which was related to 177A Mount Alexander Road in Flemington. And we'll be calling on the, if we're successful, the community to participate in what that park might look like. So that's the motion, and I'm hoping that we have support. The deadline for delivery of our application is looming. We asked for an extension from government and have been provided with one in order to be able to bring this to council for tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Soares.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Whilst I seconded this so that it would be on the floor so that we could have some debate on it, I do note that in the report it says that as part of the guidelines that council can nominate 2 parks for consideration and up to 1.3 million per park can be applied for. And also says if council does not own the land, evidence of a legally binding community access agreement is required, or some of the grant funding, but not the total amount, can be used for the land purchase. Further on in the report, I note that Patterson Street was the one that we're looking at as a pocket park to be submitted. However, there were 2 other sites noted, and one being Strathede Reserve and the Valley Lakes Sales Office sites, which are not owned by council and are harder to justify for a pocket park, given the sites are suburban locations. They're not in built up areas with growing populations. The Strathede site is in a total more than 0.2 hectares as part of the grant guideline, which also makes it less of a pocket park and more of a local park, unless only a subsection of the existing land was purchased and used to create a park. Land purchase would be required for both of these sites, and this would require resolutions by council for financial contribution, which is not identified in the budget. So whilst there might be a wish list from quite a lot of residents and people that have had a look at this and have put in, I'm pretty sure most people have had emails from residents requesting, oh, we want this in our backyard and we'd like this here and there. We can't always please everybody and do everything if we don't have the funds to do all that. So maybe in some time there might be an opportunity for us to do more things for those pockets of our community. But for this part, given that there is an opportunity there that the state government are putting out a $50 million local parks program, and we can tap into that. And as Councillor Cusack said, we were successful in the first round of getting $700,000 grant funding for a pocket park at Flemington there. Hopefully this will be successful as well, unless there's an alternate motion that someone wants to raise and put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Soares. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm probably not going to be the most popular person in Moonee Ward tonight, but please bear with me as this report has been a little bit of a journey for me. And Mayor, I would ask that you could possibly indulge me with a couple of extra minutes if needed. So when we first received our briefing papers for this particular report, I was 100% locked into supporting a round 2 pocket part application for 36 Patterson Street, Moonee Ponds. Yes, Moonee Ward did receive funding for a pocket park in round 1, but we all know Moonee Ponds is the suburb in our municipality that has undergone the most significant change in regards to development and population increase. And therefore, the more green space that we locate in Moonee Ponds, the better. However, having walked past this site as part of my daily exercise and having previously visited all other sites suggested in this report before the current restrictions were in place, I do have some concerns about the Patterson Street site. So yes, this site is in Moonee Ponds, but it is basically the most eastern property in the entire suburb. It's on the extreme edge of the suburb, and the location of the pocket park here could be argued would be of much greater benefit to Brunswick West residents on the other side of the freeway than the broader Moonee Ponds community. The report outlines the significant population growth in Moonee Ponds justifies this as the preferred pocket park location. But the reality is this site is extremely isolated to a lot of the Moonee Ponds suburb. The report also outlines that extensive development will take place at the Moonee Valley Racecourse, and it uses this as justification for this particular site. And again, this is correct. The Moonee Valley Racecourse site is going to be absolutely smashed with residential development. But let's be honest, the onus to provide open space for those residents should be on the racecourse. The entire racecourse site is an area that is 466 metres by 805 metres. So that is 375,000 square metres, nearly 100 acres. And you're telling me that as a council, we need to provide those residents that will be on the racecourse with open space, that we need to provide them with a further parcel of open space at the expense of other residents in the area that may miss out as part of this pocket park funding. I also think there are a few flaws with Patterson Street in regards to the funding guidelines. So the guidelines state the project site is identified in an approved open space plan, structure plan, or recreation plan that has undergone community engagement. Now, council hasn't quite signed off on the final sale of this site, and I do note the CEO referenced consultation in MV 2040, but as per consultation re this particular site, possibly not. The guidelines...
Councillor Nation, just so you're aware, I know that you asked for an extension of time, but in case you don't have a clock in front of you, you've hit the 3 minutes. So I will give you an extension, but just so you're aware.
Thank you, and thank you. The guidelines state that the area has high community need, e.g. lack of open space or poor quality or vulnerable to urban heat. Again, I don't disagree with this statement, but I do not believe this specific part of Moonee Ponds has a high community need. It also has significant open space nearby. It literally borders the Moonee Ponds Creek. Holbrook Reserve is just over the creek, being not even 100 metres away from a direct line of sight. There's large expanses of Ormond Park in a probably 200 metres walk up Patterson Street. And the entrance to the massive site that is the Moonee Valley Racecourse is 60 metres away. To top it off, less than 100 metres away along Dean Street, there's a pocket park on the corner of Dawson and Bulph Crescent, just over the freeway. So as such, I'm really struggling to find reasons to support this as a pocket park location ahead of the other locations in the report. I do note its proximity to Moonee Ponds Creek, and I do understand that the Land Acquisition Committee have purchased it because of the sensitive interface, but I see this more as keeping it a sensitive interface at the start of the path along Moonee Ponds Creek, or that little entrance, rather than actually being a pocket park and a community hub. So I will wait to see if there's any further recommendations that come on the floor to potentially include other sites in the area. I do have some notes on why I do think Strathaired may be a better option. Noting my time, potentially be a foreshadowed motion, I may wait to hear what other councillors say and hope that there will potentially be a foreshadowed motion that may enable that site to be picked either with or ahead of Patterson Street. Thanks, Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Nation, just confirming you're not foreshadowing. You're waiting to see if someone else foreshadows.
Well, I will wait to see. Yeah, I will wait to see if there's any further discussion.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Gauchi-Marici.
Madam Mayor, can I foreshadow an alternate motion, please?
Yep.
Can I just ask for clarification, because again, it would be possible if it's just an addition to this particular motion to do that via an amendment. So Patterson Street isn't lost. It's just not clear to me how I will possibly vote when I don't know the contents of the foreshadowed motion.
I'm just not sure if it's substantive. Well, so a foreshadowed motion has been put forward if someone is putting forward an alternative. Is that what you're asking, Councillor Marshall?
I'm asking is
sorry, an
something
amendment
that can be done via an amendment, just an addition, or is someone proposing to get rid of Patterson Street entirely? That's not what's clear to me, because my voting may swing on that. So I would be grateful for the foreshadower to confirm that's the case.
Councillor Gauchi-Marici, can you please confirm if it's something that can be put in as an amendment? Or would you like to say what it is and then governance can confirm?
I would like to foreshadow an alternative to include Strathaired.
Just Strathaired? I think is what Councillor Marshall's.
That's what I'm trying to work out.
Councillor Marshall's trying to work out whether you can do what you're trying to do with an amendment to the current motion by including Strathaired, or whether it needs to be a foreshadowed motion to just be Strathaired. Is that correct, Councillor Marshall?
Correct. Thank you, Mayor.
I will foreshadow an alternate motion to include Strathaired. I won't do it as an amendment because there was a comment there about priority that I want to consider.
So if this motion, I just need to get confirmation from governance, because if this motion is lost on the floor, whether Patterson Street would still be able to be considered in a foreshadowed motion. Kendria Pope?
Yes, Councillor Byrne. So if this current motion were lost and Councillor Gauchi-Marici put forward an alternate motion as she's foreshadowed, that, depending on in what form it's actually drafted, it could also be amended. So it could take the form of being of proposing Strathaired, and that may be carried or be lost. Councillors could also seek to amend it during debate and include both Patterson and Strathaired. That's an option.
But would be, if Patterson is lost here and that's the council decision that it's lost, would it be able to be included in the foreshadowed motion?
Yes,
initially?
it would be able to be. There's no technical barrier to including it. That's correct. Yep.
even if it's lost in this? Just
That's
confirming.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marshall, that was your
It was a point of clarification.
the
So
point of
thank you.
we got back to the point of clarification. Councillor Gauchimarici, I think, clarified that by saying that she was sticking with foreshadowed as she is considering the order. Correct,
So
Councillor Gauchimarici? Yes. Sorry, do you have another point of clarification, Councillor Marshall?
I did. I mean, given we will have voted on Petition as part of this motion, I just want to be entirely sure from a governance perspective that if a motion is lost in relation to this, that we can then vote on the same thing again.
So that was what I just clarified with governance.
And I just want to be 100% sure about that. And if we needed to take an adjournment, I would rather do that, to be clear about that. So if governance's advice is that that is 100% the case, then I'll accept that advice. But
So, Mayor, through you, the advice is that yes, you could have this motion fail, and then if we went to Councillor Gauchimarichi's foreshadowed motion and it were to again propose a different motion, including both Strathayed and Paterson, that would be appropriate for Council to debate that and make a decision.
Councillor Marshall, does that answer your point of clarification?
look, that's fine. I don't want to go around in circles. Yes, so I did want to speak on this motion. I'm not sure if Councillor Gauchimarici was also.
I will just ask Councillor Gauchimarici. Councillor Gauchimarici, are you still speaking on this motion?
I will briefly, just in case we don't end up with an alternate motion considered.
Sorry, can I just confirm you have foreshadowed a motion? Yes.
I have foreshadowed a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and you guys speaking on this motion. Thank you, Councillor Gauchimarici.
The concerns that have been raised with Paterson are of interest to me. So certainly that's something I take on board. In terms of Strathayed, that's the bit that is particularly of interest to me. Obviously, there's a significant history on that site, not just in my 4 years, but in before my term and where we've been for 40 years. Obviously, it was a very big local park, not just a pocket park at the time. Certainly the consideration about taking a couple of lots as a pocket park is of interest to me, given that we had previously been offered the land by Vic Roads at a significantly reduced price, and this may be our opportunity to do that. I'm mindful that some of the equipment from Strathayed is still sitting at the depot and could be potentially used again. So certainly those sorts of considerations for me seem like this is a way for us to still achieve a local pocket park at minimal cost. And certainly I think for me, there's a couple of other considerations that play. When we attempted to reconsider Strathayed in 2017, we talked at length about the fact that Boeing Reserve was a walk away and that was their neighbourhood park. But as I flagged when it came up then, my concern is that that's across one of the busiest roads in Strathmore, and we're asking kids to cross Mascoma Street, and it'd be different if we were trying to install a pedestrian crossing or a zebra crossing so that kids could actually walk to Boeing Reserve, but they can't. And this is a really important definition of when we talk about a 20 neighbourhood and being able to walk and recreate locally. Strathayed to me is as a smaller lot, a nice solution to that. And certainly the other thing that I think is of interest to me, not specifically on Strathayed, but that there are a couple of different grant streams currently running, and we need to think about which parks we apply for and which grant streams. And the other grant stream that doesn't close until next month, I can't see Strathayed fitting into. So certainly that's some of the things I'm considering. And I'll be keen to hear what the others say about Paterson and whether there are other concerns or around the priority order, because that's something that's of interest to me. So,
Thank you, Councillor Gauchimarici. I believe Councillor Marshall, you mentioned you were willing to speak on this.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to. You know, it's always perplexing as a councillor when you have a discussion about things multiple times and then you don't hear about issues till you get on the floor. I acknowledge that that's absolutely the right of councillors to have that debate, so I'm not backing away from that at all or diminishing that right. But, you know, this is, let's think about what this is. This is an application for a grant. This is not council committing to funding. So I'm finding this slightly awkward and embarrassing that we are ripping apart potentially our priority grant application in a public forum like this. And again, not diminishing someone's right to have a view on it. Also, probably with Strathedd, I'm entirely happy to support it being included as an application. But again, probably we all should have had this discussion some weeks ago when this was first raised. So council officers could have actually gone and taken steps to strengthen our grant application, because we're now left in a situation where we're potentially putting in something in against officer advice. And this is all obviously public information. And then our other proposed submission has just been pulled apart. So it's both a challenging and perplexing position to be in, and not an ideal one where you are going to another party asking for money. So I suppose, you know, I'm a little confused. I don't want Patterson Street to drop off, but I'm happy to support Strathedd. I had understood that they would both be included, so I'd like to move an amendment, Mayor, to include Strathedd now as a second, as another application.
So what exactly is your
The wording? Yep.
So, yep.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry.
That's okay.
Apologies for the messiness of this. So, okay, so I'd like to amend 1 to read for 2 sites in the following priority order. And then B, Strathedd Reserve Lot 23 for site purchase and construction of a pocket park. And 2, the council submit the bid for Strathedd Reserve seeking state funding for the entire amount. And 3, that council make available up to $100,000 from the Open Space Reserve if there is any shortfall in the awarded grant funds that would preclude the completion of the selected project.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Governance, can I just confirm that you've got that?
Yes, Mayor, we will be drafting that up, and I will see if governance can screen share if necessary. If councillors are clear on what has been moved, you can simply proceed while we work on that in the background.
It's, yeah, as per the document that was circulated earlier this evening.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I ask a point of clarification just on that amendment?
Yes.
So in regards to the amendment referring to priority order, can I get an officer to clarify how priority order would be, how the motion to deal with it in a priority order would actually be actioned, whether or not that's actioned at an officer level or at a state government level, or how that would actually happen?
I believe they have asked us if we are submitting more than one application to put in a priority order. So you're asking if officers will list them 1 and 2. Is that what you're asking?
Just how that priority order would be actioned by officers.
Okay. So I will. I'm not sure who the best person to ask this one. Potentially. Petrus Barry, if you're online, thank you. How that would be actioned?
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, the preference is if the councillors decide tonight, if there are two options, what the priority would be. If not, councillors will probably be asked by the department what the priority is, and officers will then most likely go for the option as per the recommendation in the report as it stands, which is Patterson. The motion as it stands could perhaps have the 2 words added for 2 sites in the following priority order, and then whichever one is first is placed as A, and your option for the second one is placed as B. So that could be included in the following priority order. Those words could perhaps be added before the first one comes up.
So we actually have an amendment on the floor, so we'll have to.
So the
just
amendment, Mayor, does actually include those
say
wordings.
that,
Yep.
yes. Councillor Nation, does that answer your point of clarification?
Not necessarily, because I think Mr. Barry assumed that we didn't have those words priority. So I guess if I need to rephrase the point of clarification, as part of the application process, are we required to put a preference over one site to the other if submitting two sites?
Councillor Officer Barry.
Mayor, the answer is yes. We will have to provide a preference.
Now, Councillor Nation, I'm assuming that answers your point of clarification. Now, we do have an amendment on the floor, which has been moved by Councillor Marshall. Now, are all councillors clear with what the amendment is?
So it is the one that was circulated earlier this evening, just to be clear.
Councillor Marshall, just for clarity, just one more time, if you're okay to read that out, just so there's clarity as well for viewers.
No problems at all. So one will read as per the initial motion with the addition of the words for two sites in the following priority order. Then there's A, then there's B, Strathayed Reserve, lot 23 for site purchase and construction of a pocket park. And that 2, that council submit the bid for Strathayed Reserve seeking state funding for the entire amount, no contribution from council. 3, that council make available up to $100,000 from the open space reserve if there is any shortfall in the awarded grant funds that would preclude completion of the selected project. So just simply as was circulated earlier this evening prior to the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Is there a seconder for that amendment? If there is no seconder for the amendment, it will lapse. Okay, so I don't believe there is a seconder for the amendment. So, Councillor Marshall, if you would like to, I believe you were speaking, so if you'd like to continue speaking on the substantive motion.
Well, again, this is just embarrassing, and you know, to think that we would muck up a grant application opportunity in a way like this is just, I'm both embarrassed and mortified, and I apologise to the public. So I'm not sure what's intended now by the foreshadowed motion. I've got no idea whether someone's proposing to knock out Patterson Street entirely. Again, you know, this is where the ability to work cooperatively as a council, having differences of opinion, is really something that you'd hope we could be able to do. So it's disappointing that we find ourselves in this situation. So I would ask Mayor for clarification again, as a point of clarification, if we can have some understanding, is it proposed to knock Patterson Street out of a grant submission as part of the foreshadowed motion?
Well, the foreshadowed motion will be as it is.
No, but that's not, sorry, the foreshadowed motion could be anything. So all I'm simply asking is a point of clarification, which is entirely reasonable, given that's material to how people vote on this particular motion that's on the floor. Why would that be something that people wouldn't be willing to share?
Councillor Gauchimerici, are you happy to answer that?
Absolutely. The foreshadowed motion leaves Patterson Street in.
As second priority, I'm assuming.
You may assume incorrectly.
Sorry, I'm assuming incorrectly, or?
Yes.
Okay. This is getting, councillors, can we please just stick to what we're here to do? It's very hard to understand what's really going on here. I'm really struggling to interpret a few things. Councillor Marshall, there's a foreshadowed motion. Just hold on, we've still got a point, just wait, Councillor Sorais, we've got a point of clarification that Councillor Marshall wanted to know in regards to the foreshadowed motion. Councillor Gauchimerici has confirmed that the foreshadowed motion will include Patterson Street. I'm unsure as to the order. is my understanding of that. Does that answer
So
your?
well, then
It
I will
doesn't
put
at all,
forward.
but
Well, I'll put
that's
forward
fine.
an amendment if I can, because my position is very clear. I'll put forward an amendment that includes Strathaired, but places priority on it above Patterson. Do you want me to give you? So the words will be
Yes, Councillor Nation.
exactly what was probably Councillor Gauchi-Marici circulated, but with the two names flipped, which is consistent with my address.
Can I confirm with governance that that is not too much of a change to the substantive motion?
Mayor, that would be appropriate and allowed within our current protocol. The only amendments which are disallowed are those which are substantially the opposite of the motion on the floor, and I would not suggest that that falls into that category.
If we've got Patterson Street as the #1 priority and then it's not the #1 priority, I am mindful that that would then be
Sorry, point of clarification, Mayor, the existing motion on the floor does not have the word priority in it because there is only one site, being Patterson Street, in the existing motion on the floor. So this...
I understand that, Councillor Nation, but it's a single thing, so it's the priority because it is only one.
Correct.
I will disagree with your ruling, but I obviously understand
Mayor,
it.
Can I move that we have a short adjournment, just because I think we need to be a bit sensible about this, and I don't want to make things any muddier than they need to be. So,
Mayor, I actually have an amendment on the floor, so I'm just concerned, does that amendment...
Can I second Councillor
halfway
Nation's
through,
amendment?
does it lapse?
Do have an amendment.
So I had a motion to adjourn the meeting. So
sorry, my amendment
before...
was on the...
Okay, councillors.
Already on the floor before.
Councillors, the amendment is on the floor. Can I get confirmation from governance if an adjournment can be moved before an amendment has been seconded?
Mayor,
An adjournment, sorry.
An adjournment can be sought, and when the business is resumed, the motion that Councillor Nation has moved will be enlivened again, and then can be seconded.
And can we also, the point about the, because I don't want to have to come back out and debate this, the point about that priority issue. So is that significant a change to the motion, that it needs to be a new motion? I think we need to, during this adjournment process, if it's moved, to just clear that out.
Okay, so Councillor Marshall has moved that we adjourn the meeting for an appropriate, how long would you like?
5 minutes, hopefully we can sort it.
For 5 minutes. Is there a second?
Sorry, Mayor, is my motion, so my motion's been accepted?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, well,
on the floor.
We're confirming with governance, but we will come back to your motion. Has my motion been accepted? I thought I was giving clarification on the wording of the motion. My understanding is we're getting clarification in the adjournment, but I will throw to Kendria Pope.
Councillor Nation, through you, Mayor, your motion has been moved. Once the adjournment wraps up and we resume business, it will be on the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as I asked before to Officer Pope, I'm just mindful that it is more than a substantive motion. As the chair of this meeting, I'm very concerned that it is changing the substantive motion. Officer Pope.
Mayor, that's correct. It is an amendment.
Yes.
What I'm advising is that I don't see it as substantially opposite to the motion that is live.
Okay.
We should probably have that discussion further in the adjournment.
Okay, thank you, Officer Pope. Now, Councillor Marshall has moved that we adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the need for an adjournment?
I just think let's just have the adjournment, clarify these things and come back, and no one wants to keep going around in circles. It's not helpful for anyone. It doesn't reflect on us all well, so let's just do it, and whatever, if we can, Councillor Nation's point, if we're comfortable within the governance rules that's fine, that's fine, we'll debate it, okay? But let's just not make this any messier than it currently is.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack?
Let's get on with the adjournment, have a conversation about what's real here, and try to understand what the secondary hidden agenda is.
Sorry, point of order. That is an outrageous comment by Councillor Cusack to say that anyone has a hidden agenda. I ask that he retracts that, because that is a statement that is untrue and not permitted under the meeting rules.
All right.
Councillor Nation raising, Councillor Cusack, are you okay to withdraw that comment? Councillor Nation, if you are raising a point of order, you do need to say what becomes.
Yeah, point of order. He has made a statement that is untrue.
What section of the meeting procedures?
It doesn't need to be quoted as per our
We
meeting.
do that. Okay, Councillor Cusack has withdrawn his comment. Councillor Marshall, Councillor Cusack has spoken on the adjournment. Would anyone else like to speak on the adjournment? No, I will put the adjournment I've put Councillor Marshall's adjournment to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Viewers online, I do apologise. We will be adjourning for 5 minutes, and we will see you back online shortly. Thank you.